Kim Jae-hwan sat alone in the orbital station bar. The place was called the Rusty Bolt. It was dark and quiet. The only light came from a flickering sign above the liquor shelf. The air smelled like old grease and recycled oxygen. Jae-hwan preferred it that way. He did not like noisy places. On the scratch table in front of him was a small, polished box. It was made of dark wood. His hands, which were rough and marked with old scars, rested on either side of it. He did not open it. He already knew what was inside. A traditional Korean jangdo, a silver knife. It was a groom's gift, a symbol of a promise. It felt out of place here, in this dirty bar at the edge of human space. But so did Jae-hwan. He was a veteran. He had served in the Republic of Korea Army for many years. Now he owned a small cargo ship called the Steady Anchor. He hauled freight between lonely outposts. The work was steady. The silence was heavy. The silence was the problem. That was why he was here, not for love. He was not a young man dreaming of romance. He was a practical man. The laws for independent freight haulers were strict. A solo pilot had lower mass limits, less pay, more dangerous, long trips. A registered co-pilot changed everything. It meant better contracts. It meant a voice other than the ship's computer to break the endless quiet. Finding a human who wanted that life was hard. So he had looked to the Draconi. They were a reptilian people from a nearby sector. They were peaceful traders now. Some of their people, he was told, sought quiet work off their home worlds. There were agencies, mail-order services. It was a business transaction. He had sent his credits. They had sent a contract and a name. Isumin. He had seen her picture once. A formal image. Scales the color of green stone. Dark, intelligent eyes. He did not know what she looked like when she smiled. He did not expect to find out. He hoped for a good working partner. Someone quiet. Someone who understood that this was about survival, not fairy tales. His ship was fueled and ready. A small cabin was prepared. He had bought the jangdo because the agency suggested a traditional gift. A sign of good faith. He picked it up now. The box was cool and smooth in his hand. He put it in the pocket of his jacket. He stood up. His knees ached a little. An old injury. He left a few credit chips on the table for his untouched drink and walked out. The docking bay was cold and loud. Machinery clanged. Ships of all shapes hissed and groaned. His own ship, the Steady Anchor, was a sturdy, boxy thing. It was not pretty, but it was reliable. He looked at Dock 7C. It was empty. A slow worry began to curl in his stomach. He walked to the baymaster's office. A human woman looked up from a screen. Yeah. The Draconi shuttle. For Dock 7C. Is it delayed? The woman tapped on her console. Her face changed. It became careful, neutral. The look of someone about to deliver bad news. You waiting for someone on that? Yes. She sighed. You haven't heard? It came over the main alert an hour ago. The Draconi transport heart of Corvus. It had a catastrophic drive failure in the Hieron asteroid belt. Big explosion. Debris field. Search and rescue scanned. No life signs. They're calling it. No survivors. The words were simple. They were clean. They hit Jae-hwan like a physical blow. He felt the cool weight of the box in his pocket. You're sure? He asked. His own voice sounded distant. Scans are clear. It's on the public feed if you want to see. She pointed to a large screen on the wall of the bay. He walked to it. He stared at the shifting text of official announcements. There it was. Heart of Corvus. Status? Lost. Cause? Drive core failure. And then a list. Passenger manifest. His eyes scanned down. He found it near the bottom. Isumin. Weaver cast. Weaver. He did not know what that meant. A man in a station uniform approached him. He held a data slate. Are you Kim Jae-hwan? Jae-hwan nodded. We were notified of your arrangement. The agency has been contacted. Your full payment has been refunded to your account. You should see it within the cycle. The man's voice was polite, professional. It was over. A business transaction had failed. A simple refund. The man waited for a response. Jae-hwan said nothing. The man gave a small, awkward nod and walked away. Jae-hwan stood before the big screen for a long time. He looked at the empty dock. He imagined a small shuttle landing, the ramp coming down, a figure stepping out, looking around, as lost as he was. A beginning. Now there was only an end. An end in a distant asteroid belt. He had lost people before. In the service. Good people. He knew the hollow, angry feeling that followed. This was different, but the hollow feeling was the same. He had not known her, but he had known the hope of her. The hope of a little less silence. He turned and walked back to his ship. The bay master gave him a pitying look. He ignored it. He boarded the steady anchor. The door sealed behind him with a final sound. The familiar silence of the ship wrapped around him. It felt heavier now. He sat in his pilot's chair. He did not start the engines. He pulled the wooden box from his pocket. He opened it. The silver knife inside gleamed in the low light. A tool for cutting. For new beginnings. He closed the box. On his console, he called up the navigational chart. He zoomed in on the Hieron asteroid belt. The last known coordinates of the heart of Corvus pulsed softly, a marker of tragedy. No life signs, they said. Kim Jae-hwan, the veteran who always finished the mission, who never left a fallen comrade behind, stared at those coordinates. The refund was in his account. The sensible thing was to take a freight job, to move on. His hand reached out. His fingers tapped the console. He began plotting a course. Not for the next job, but for the debris field. He had to see it. For the ghost of a woman named Lee Soo-min. For the ghost of his own hope. Because sometimes the only thing to do was to go and look. The silence inside the steady anchor was different now. It was a busy silence, filled with the hum of the engines and the quiet clicks of the navigation computer. Kim Jae-hwan watched the stars streak by his viewport. He was 3 days out from the asteroid belt. His sister, Micha, had called him 3 times. Her face on the video screen was tight with worry. Jae-hwan, what are you doing? She asked. Her voice was sharp. They said there were no survivors. You are burning fuel you cannot get back. You are losing contracts. Jae-hwan listened. He sipped his coffee. I know, he said. Then why? For a woman you never met? It was a business deal. The business is over. It is sad, but it is over. He looked at her face so like their mother's. She cared. He knew she did. I need to see it, he said, his voice low and even. See what? A bunch of broken metal? Jae-hwan, you cannot fix this. You cannot save her. Micha's words were not cruel. They were just true. I know, he said again. There was no more argument to give. He was not going to the belt to save anyone. He was going to see the proof. To close the circle himself. A soldier's habit. You had to see the battlefield to understand it. After a long pause, Micha sighed. Her shoulders slumped. Just be careful. The belt is unstable. And it is not a good place for a man alone. The call ended. The screen went dark. Jae-hwan leaned back in his chair. He was a man alone. He was used to it. The cockpit of his ship was his world. Every scratch on the console, every soft glow of a dial, was familiar. He looked at the empty co-pilot's seat. He had cleaned it. He had checked all the systems on that side, making sure they worked perfectly. Now the seat was just an empty space. 2 more days passed. Then the ship's sensors began to ping. He was reaching the edge of the debris field. Jae-hwan slowed the engines. The steady anchor moved forward carefully, like a man walking through a dark forest. The first pieces of the heart of Corvus came into view. Small bits of metal and composite material floated past his viewport. They glittered in the light of the distant sun. Then, larger pieces appeared. A torn section of hull, the beautiful swirling patterns of Draconi design now twisted and blackened. A shattered engine nozzle. It was a graveyard of a ship. Jae-hwan's face was calm. He had seen destruction before. He guided his ship deeper into the field. His scanners worked constantly, mapping the large fragments. He was looking for the main body of the ship, or what was left of it. He was also looking for the black box, the flight recorder. Maybe it would tell him what happened. Not that it mattered. But he wanted to know. He found a large piece of the ship's middle section. It was bigger than his own freighter. He maneuvered close to it. He put on his suit and went outside. The silence of space was total, pressed against his helmet. His boots magnetized to the broken hull. He walked across the torn metal. Inside the wreck, it was worse. Twisted corridors, melted doors, personal items floated in the frozen air. A draconi tool, a piece of cloth with bright colors. He did not look at them for long. He felt like an intruder. He returned to his ship after an hour. He had found no black box, no signs of life, just cold, silent death. Back in his pilot's seat, he felt a deep tiredness. Michao was right. This was a waste. Painful, stupid waste. He prepared to turn the ship around. He would go home. He would take a job. As he started the turn, a small alarm beeped on his console. It was not a major alert. It was a secondary scanner. It was designed to find odd energy signatures for salvage. It had found something. Faint, rhythmic pulse. It was not the steady signal of a machine. It was irregular. Organic. Jaehoon stopped the turn. He frowned. He ran the scan again. The signal was very weak. It was coming from inside a large, dense piece of wreckage. The piece looked like a part of the ship's storage area. It was heavily damaged. It was probably nothing. A flickering battery. A piece of broken equipment cycling on and off. But the rhythm, it was too much like a heartbeat. He knew the official report. No life signs. The search and rescue ships had good scanners. They were never wrong. But they scanned from far away and quickly. They looked for strong, clear signals. This signal was so weak it was almost not there. It was buried under thick layers of metal and rock from the asteroid field. Jaehoon's hands moved over the controls. He guided the steady anchor closer to the large fragment. He extended his ship's mechanical arm. Carefully, he moved aside some smaller debris blocking the way. He found what looked like a service hatch. It was sealed shut, bent in the explosion. The signal was coming from behind that hatch. He sat in his chair for a full minute, just listening to the soft, steady ping of the scanner. Ping, pause, ping, pause, ping. It was the sound of a ghost. Or a heartbeat. He knew what the smart thing was. The safe thing. To leave. To trust the official report. Kim Jae-hwan was a practical man. But he was also a man who had been trained never to assume. Never to leave a possibility unchecked. He stood up. He walked back to the airlock. He put his suit on again. This time, he took a cutting torch. He was going to open the hatch. The cutting torch burned with a bright, silent blue flame. In the emptiness of space, there was no sound. Only the vibration Jae-hwan could feel through his suit's heavy gloves. He worked slowly, carefully. The metal of the hatch was strong, but twisted. He cut along the seam where the door met the hull. Sparks flew and died instantly in the vacuum. Tiny, brief stars. His mind was quiet. He focused only on the task. Cut, move, cut again. Don't rush. Don't make a mistake. The rhythmic ping from his ship scanner was a constant presence in his helmet speaker. Ping, pause, ping. It was a whisper from behind the metal. Finally, the cut was complete. He put the torch away. He used a pry bar from his toolkit. He wedged it into the cut. He pushed. The muscles in his arms and back strained. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan he felt more than heard, the hatch shifted. It moved inward a few centimeters. A puff of frozen air crystals, the last breath of the ship's atmosphere, escaped like a ghost. Jae-hwan pulled the hatch open. It was dark inside. His suit's light cut a beam through the black. He saw a small space, a maintenance crawl space. It was not meant for people to stay in. It was for cables and pipes. But someone had used it as a shelter. In the center of the space was a device. It was draconi design, smooth and organic looking. It was cracked, and its light pulsed weakly. A personal stasis field generator. He had seen them before. They were expensive. They could keep one person in hibernation for a short time. This one was almost dead. Inside the faint, flickering bubble of the field, curled into a tight ball, was a figure. Jaehwan's breath caught in his throat. He moved closer, his light washing over her. It was a Draconi female. Her scales were the color of green stone, just like in the picture, but now they were dull and covered in a fine dust. One of her wings, which were folded against her back, was clearly broken, bent at a wrong angle. She was smaller than he had imagined. She looked young. Her face was peaceful in sleep, but there was a tightness around her eyes. Pain, even in hibernation. This was Isumin. She was alive. The stasis field flickered again. The light dimmed. The generator was failing. When it failed, she would wake up. Or, if her injuries were bad, she would die quickly in the cold and the lack of air. Jaehwan did not think. He acted. He checked the space around her. No other survivors. Just her. He looked at the generator. He could not fix it. He had to move her. He had an emergency rescue protocol. His ship could extend a flexible tunnel and umbilical to the hatch. He could bring her straight into his small medical bay without exposing her to open space. It was risky. Moving her could make her injuries worse. But staying here was certain death. He called his ship with a voice command. Anchor, deploy rescue umbilical to my location. Seal and pressurize medical bay. A confirmation light flashed in his helmet. From his ship, a thick, flexible tube began to extend like a white worm. It moved slowly across the gap between the ships. It connected to the hatch frame with a soft clunk. He felt through his boots. He turned back to the stasis field. It was growing weaker, the bubble shrinking. He had to move fast. He reached carefully into the fading energy field. Tingled against his suit. He slid his arms under her. She was lighter than he expected. He lifted her gently. Her broken wing hung loosely. He carried her the few steps to the umbilical. He stepped inside. The door sealed behind him. He heard the hiss of air. Pressure returned. Lights came on. He walked down the short tunnel into his ship. The door to his small medical room was open. He lay her on the flat, padded table. The stasis generator, now disconnected from her suit, gave one last pulse and went dark. Jaehwan stepped back. He took off his helmet. The air of his ship smelled familiar. Of machine oil and old coffee. Now it also smelled of something else. A strange, dry scent, like warm stone after rain. It was her. He looked at her lying on the table. She was real. Not a picture. Not a name on a manifest. A living being, broken and lost. Her eyes moved under their lids. A soft sound escaped her throat. A faint, pained hiss. Her body trembled. Jaehwan moved to the medical cabinet. He pulled out the basic trauma kit. It was made for humans, but it had universal items. Bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers that could be calibrated for different biologies. He set to work. He scanned her with the medical sensor. Broken wing, 2 cracked ribs, minor cuts and bruises, dehydration. She was lucky. If the stasis field had held a few days less, she would have been dead. He carefully straightened her wing as best he could and used a flexible splint from his kit to hold it. He gave her a shot for the pain and for infection. He put a blanket over her. Then he just waited. He pulled a stool over and sat beside the table. He watched her breathe, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. It was the same rhythm as the scanner's ping. A heartbeat in the silence. He thought about the empty dock. The refund. The official report. No survivors. He looked at the small, green-scaled woman on his medical table. She had survived in a dark hole, in the cold wreck of her hopes. She had fought to live. Kim Jaehwan, the veteran who came to see a graveyard, had found a survivor. The transaction was void. The contract was gone. But here she was, and here he was. The silence in the ship was no longer empty. It was filled with the soft sound of her breathing. Consciousness returned to Isumin like a slow, painful tide. First there was smell. Not the sterile, recycled air of a Draconi vessel, or the burnt metal terror of the dying ship. This smell was organic, mixed with chemicals and something warm and bitter. Coffee. Then came sound. A deep, low hum. The sound of a ship's engines, but steady and calm. Not the screaming pitch of a drive core failing. Pain came next. A sharp ache in her side. A deep, throbbing pain in her wing. She tried to move it and a hiss escaped her lips. "Don't move it." The voice was low, male, and calm. It spoke Galactic Common with a slight accent she didn't recognize. Sumin forced her eyes open. The light was soft. She was lying on a padded surface in a small, clean room. Medical equipment was fixed to the walls. Standing a few feet away, his back against a cabinet, was a human. He was older than she expected. His black hair was cut short, with threads of gray at the temples. His face was quiet, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years, not laughter. He was not looking directly at her, but his attention was completely on her. He held a cup in his hands. She remembered the picture. Kim Yaean, the human from the contract. Her mind, still fuzzy, tried to put the pieces together. The explosion, the screaming, crawling into the crawlspace, her personal generator clutched in her hands. The dark, the cold creeping in as the power faded. "You are on my ship," the man said. His voice was even like he was stating a simple fact. "The steady anchor. I found you in the wreck." Sumin tried to sit up. A wave of dizziness hit her. The human, Jae-hwan, took a step forward but stopped himself, as if not wanting to crowd her. He gestured to a panel beside the bed. "There is water. The tube is safe for your biology. You are dehydrated." She found the tube and took a small sip. The water was cool and perfect. She drank a little more. Her thoughts became clearer. "The others?" she asked. Her own voice a rough whisper. Jae-hwan's face changed almost imperceptibly. The lines around his mouth tightened. He shook his head once. "No. Just you." A sharp grief cut through her. She closed her eyes for a moment. She had not known the others well, but they had been companions on the journey. Now they were gone. She was here, in a stranger's ship. "Why?" she asked, opening her eyes to look at him. "Why did you come to the wreck?" He seemed to consider the question. He took a sip from his cup. "They said no one survived. I had to see." "To see for yourself?" "Yes." It was a soldier's answer. She knew the type. The Weaver caste were observers, sensitives. They were taught to understand patterns and motivations. This man's motivation was not curiosity. It was duty. A duty to facts. "You are Kim Jae-hwan," she stated. He nodded. "You are Lee Sumin." "Yes." She looked down at her body. The blanket, the careful splint on her wing. "You treated my injuries. Thank you." "It was necessary," he said. He did not say, "You're welcome." He stated another fact. He turned and put his cup down on a small table. On that table, she saw a small, polished wooden box. It looked out of place in the utilitarian room. "The contract," she began, unsure. "Is void," he finished. "The agency was notified. The transport was lost. I received a refund." He said it without emotion. It was just what had happened. Sumin absorbed this. She was a lost package, a canceled transaction. Yet he had come. He had dug through wreckage. He had brought her here and fixed her wounds. He owed her nothing. "What happens now?" she asked. "I will take you to the nearest Dracani outpost. It is a 3-week journey. You can stay here until you are stronger. Then you can go home." Home. The word felt heavy. She had left home for a reason. The Weaver caste was respected. But for her, it had been a cage. The expectations. The silent disapproval of her choice to leave. Going back would be a failure. They would say she was foolish. They would find a new, quieter way to smother her. She looked around the small medical bay. It was clean but worn. Everything had a purpose. There were no decorations. Through the open door, she could see a slice of the ship's corridor. It was the same. Neat, bare, functional. She looked back at the man. He was waiting for her next question, patient and still. He had saved her life, but he asked for no thanks. He explained no heroics. He was just a man in a ship, doing what he believed was the next right thing. "You are alone on this ship?" she asked. "Yes." "It is very quiet." "Yes," he said again. A simple confirmation. For the first time, Sumin noticed the quality of the silence. It was not the empty silence of space she felt on the transport. This silence was different. It was a quiet that lived in the hum of the engines and the slow, steady breath of this human. It was a quiet that felt held. "I will not be a problem," she said softly. "And I thank you, not just for the medical care, for looking." Jae-hwan met her eyes then. His gaze was direct, but not harsh. He gave a single, slow nod. "Rest," he said. "Your body needs to heal." He turned and left the medical bay. Sliding the door shut behind him with a soft click, Sumin was alone again, but not like before. She was in a safe, quiet place. She was alive because a practical man with a duty to see things for himself had followed a faint signal. She looked at the closed door. Then her eyes moved to the small wooden box on the table. She did not know what was inside it, but she knew it was important. It was the only thing in this room that was not a tool. She lay back on the pad, the pain in her side a steady reminder of all she had lost, and all she had, strangely, found. The journey began in silence. Jae-hwan returned to his routines. He woke early. He checked the ship systems. He drank his coffee in the cockpit, watching the stars. He ate simple meals from the food printer. He exercised in a small, clear space in the cargo hold. His movements were careful and precise. A man living within a well-worn circle. Sumin rested for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she left the medical bay. She moved slowly, her body stiff. She found Jae-hwan in the cockpit. He was studying a navigational chart. He looked up when she entered. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the empty co-pilot's chair. He nodded. "Yes." She sat down carefully, mindful of her bandaged wing. The chair was comfortable, but it felt huge. She watched him. He did not speak. He went back to his chart. The silence was not angry or uncomfortable. It was simply there, like a third person in the room. Sumin began to watch the ship. She was a weaver. Her talent was not with physical things, but with energy. The subtle fields that all living things and machines created. The steady anchor had its own energy. It was a steady, strong hum from the engines. But underneath, she could feel other things. A small, jagged pulse from a faulty light panel in the corridor. A low, sad resonance from the life support recycling system, overworked and tired. A constant, whispering static from the navigation computer. Like a nervous thought. It was a ship of functional loneliness. She said nothing that day, or the next. She just sat and felt the ship's energy, and the man's energy beside her. His energy was like a deep, still pool. On the surface, it was calm. But underneath, she could feel old pains, like smooth, heavy stones resting at the bottom. On the 5th day, while Jae-hwan was in the cargo hold, she tried something small. She focused on the faulty light panel in the corridor. Its energy was a tiny, sharp spike. She reached out with her mind, not to touch it, but to gently smooth the energy around it, to encourage it to flow correctly. It was a small thing, like brushing tangled hair. The light, which had been flickering for years, went steady. It gave off a soft, even glow. Jae-hwan walked past it later. He stopped. He looked at the light for a long moment. He did not look at Sumin, who was sitting in the cockpit doorway. He just gave a small, almost invisible nod and continued on. The next day, she focused on the life support system. She did not fix it. It was not broken, but she soothed its tired resonance, weaving a pattern of calm into its cycle. The constant, slight vibration in the floor that no one ever noticed, but everyone felt, softened and disappeared. That evening, Jae-hwan heated a meal for them both. It was a simple stew. He placed a bowl in front of her at the small galley table. "The ship is quiet," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. "Did you do that?" "I am a weaver," she said, as if that explained everything. "It is what I do. I make harmony in systems. I did not mean to interfere." He took a spoonful of his stew. He chewed slowly. "It is not interference," he said finally. "It is better." It was the first kind thing he had said. It was not a compliment. It was an observation, but it felt like a gift. After that, a quiet rhythm developed. He would fly the ship. She would sit and weave. She smoothed the grating energy of the engine so its hum became a lower, more peaceful sound. She gently pushed back the chaotic cosmic background radiation that pressed against the ship's shields, making the view from the viewport seem sharper, the stars brighter. One day, she saw him wince as he stood up from his chair, his hand going to his lower back. An old injury. Without thinking, she wove a tiny thread of soothing energy towards him. Not to heal it, but to ease the tight pain around it. He froze. He turned his head and looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. He had felt it. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "That was personal. I should not have." He was silent for a long time. He slowly straightened up. The tension in his back was gone. "It is fine," he said, his voice low. "Thank you." He did not ask about her weaving again. But sometimes, when the silence felt too deep, he would ask a small question. "Your home world, is it warm?" "Yes, very. We have crystal deserts that sing when the wind blows." He would listen. He would nod. He did not ask more. One evening, she found the courage to ask him a question. "You were a soldier?" "Yes," he said. He did not offer more. "Why did you stop?" He looked out the viewport. "My unit. There was an accident. A training accident. They all died. I lived." He said it plainly. The old, heavy stones in his pool of energy shifted. After that, the noise of people. It was too much. This, he gestured to the ship, is better. She understood. She had left her home to escape a different kind of noise. The noise of expectations. Weeks passed. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was woven through with the soft hum of a contented ship, with the quiet respect of two people who did not need to fill every space with words. She learned his patterns. He learned not to startle her with sudden movements. That he was fixing a loose panel one afternoon. She saw the small, wooden box sitting on a shelf. He had moved it from the medical bay. "What is in the box?" she asked. He stopped his work. He looked at the box. A jangdo, a silver knife. It was meant to be a gift. For the contract. "A knife?" she asked, confused. "For cutting new paths," he said, repeating the old meaning. "For a new beginning." He picked it up, held it for a moment, then put it back on the shelf. He went back to his work. Sumin looked from the box to Jaehwan's back as he worked. She thought of the empty dock, the refund, the lost contract. She thought of the steady quiet of this ship, and the man who had given her a place in it without asking for anything. The transaction was void. But something else, quiet and unplanned, was weaving itself in its place. The Draconi outpost grew in the viewport, a cluster of organic-looking structures clinging to a dark asteroid. It looked like a hive of smooth, gray stone. Jaehwan guided the steady anchor towards the designated docking bay. The quiet hum of the ship, which had felt so peaceful for weeks, now felt fragile. Sumin stood in the doorway of the cockpit. Her good wing held tight against her back. Her splint was off, but the wing was still stiff. She had said little all morning. Jaehwan had said less. The ship settled into the dock with a soft thud. The systems powered down to a low idle. The silence was suddenly very loud. "They will have medical care for you here," Jaehwan said, not looking at her. He was checking the docking seals on his screen. "Better than mine." "Yes," Sumin said. A communication request flashed on the console. It was the outpost docking control. Jaehwan accepted it. A Draconi mail appeared on the screen. His scales were a dull gray, and his posture was official. "Freighter steady anchor, you are cleared. We have been notified of your situation. A representative will meet you at Bay 12 to receive the survivor." "Understood," Jaehwan said. The screen went dark. He stood up. He picked up the small wooden box from the shelf. He held it for a moment, then put it in the pocket of his jacket. He did not look at Sumin. "We should go." They walked side by side down the corridor to the airlock. The door opened with a hiss. A ramp extended down to the outpost deck. The air was cold and smelled of minerals and alien machinery. The Draconi officer was waiting. He was older, with a scar across his snout. Another, younger Dracani stood behind him with a medical scanner. "I am Officer Gorin," the older one said. His eyes moved from Jae-hwan to Sumin. "You are Sumin, Weaver Caste, from the heart of Corvus?" "I am," Sumin said, her voice formal. "Your survival is a rare luck. The human has our thanks for the retrieval." Officer Gorin's tone made it clear the thanks were a procedure, not a feeling. He gestured to the assistant. "We will take you to medical for a full examination. Then, arrangements will be made for your repatriation to the home cluster." The words were efficient. Final. Repatriation. Sending her back. Sumin did not move. Jae-hwan stood still beside her. A solid, quiet presence. Officer Gorin looked at Jae-hwan. "Your assistance is complete. The contract with the agency was dissolved upon the ship's loss. No further obligation exists." He turned back to Sumin. "Come." Jae-hwan took a slow breath. This was it. The circle was closed. He had done his duty. He had brought the survivor home. He gave a small, stiff nod. He began to turn back towards his ship. No, the word was soft, but clear. It was Sumin. Officer Gorin blinked. "What?" Sumin took a step forward, away from the ramp, towards the officer. "I am not choosing repatriation." Officer Gorin's head tilted, confused. "It is not a choice. You are a survivor. You return to your family and your caste." "I left my home cluster by choice," Sumin said, her voice gaining strength. "I entered the companionship agreement by choice. The agreement failed, but my choice to leave did not." She glanced back at Jae-hwan. He had stopped, watching her, his face unreadable. She looked at the officer. "The human party fulfilled his part. He came for me. He has provided care. The original agreement, I choose to honor it." Officer Gorin made a low, clicking sound of annoyance. "Do not be foolish. The agreement was a transaction. It is null. The human has his refund. You have your life. That is the end." Sumin stood straighter. She turned to Jae-hwan and spoke, not in Galactic Common, but in the flowing, complex language of the Dracani. Her voice was different, more musical but firm. She was speaking to him, but also for the officer to hear. Jae-hwan did not understand the words, but he understood her posture. She was not asking. She was stating. Officer Gorin listened, his expression shifting from annoyance to surprise. When she finished, he stared at her. He then turned to Jae-hwan, switching back to common. "She says the human silence is a resonant quiet. She says his ship does not feel like a metal cage, but like a sanctuary. She says she chooses the original contract, if the human is still willing." He sounded baffled. "She is a weaver. They say strange things, but it is her legal right to choose if you agree." All sounds seemed to fade from the docking bay. Jae-hwan looked at Sumin. She looked back at him, her dark eyes unsure but steady. She was not talking about love. She was talking about the quiet they had built, about the peaceful hum of the ship, about two wounded people who did not make the silence worse. He thought of the empty co-pilot's seat. He thought of the steady light in the corridor. He thought of the pain in his back that had quietly faded. He thought of the wooden box in his pocket. He stepped forward. He stopped in front of her. He pulled the box from his pocket. He opened it. The silver Jangdo gleamed under the outpost lights. He did not hand it to her. He held the open box so she could see. "It is for cutting new paths," he said, repeating the old words. "For a new beginning." A soft, blue flush colored the scales of her neck, a Dracani sign of deep emotion. She reached out and touched the box, her fingers resting beside the knife. "A good tool," she whispered in common. Officer Gorin sighed, a long, hissing breath. "Very well. The paperwork will be unusual, but it will be done." He shook his head, muttering in Dracani as he walked away, his assistant scrambling after him. They were alone at the foot of the ramp. The cold air of the outpost, the smell of stone, the distant sounds of machinery. It all seemed far away. Jae-hwan closed the box. He looked at his ship, the steady anchor. Then he looked at the woman beside him. "The ship is quiet," he said. "Yes," Sumin said, a small, real smile touching her lips for the first time. "It is a good quiet." He nodded towards the ramp. "We should finish the pre-flight checks. It is a long journey." Together, they turned and walked back up the ramp into the ship. The door sealed behind them, shutting out the cold, official world. They were not going home. They were going forward. The door of the steady anchor sealed with a deep, final sound. The cold, mineral smell of the outpost was gone. The air inside was warm. It smelled like machine oil, old coffee, and the dry, clean scent of sun-warmed stone. It smelled like home. Jae-hwan stood for a moment in the corridor, listening to the familiar hum of the idle systems. Sumin stood beside him. She was looking at the walls, the ceiling, as if seeing them for the first time. Or the last time. The quiet between them was full of unspoken things. He walked to the cockpit. She followed. He slid into the pilot's chair. The leather was worn smooth in just his shape. He began the startup sequence. Lights glowed on the console. Screens flickered to life. Sumin stood by the co-pilot's seat. She did not sit. She watched his hands move, sure and calm over the controls. He requested departure clearance. A voice from the outpost crackled approval. Jae-hwan guided the ship out of the dock. The asteroid fell away behind them, becoming just another dark rock in a sea of stars. He set the course. Not for a specific port, just a clear lane towards the next freight job he had lined up weeks ago. The universe opened up before them, dark and endless and peaceful. He engaged the main engines. The deep thrum filled the ship. He sat back. Sumin finally sat down in the co-pilot's chair. It did not feel so large anymore. She settled into it. She let her hands rest on the smooth arms. She looked out at the stars, streaking past in soft lines of light. For a long time, they just flew. There was no need to speak. The event at the outpost hung in the air, but it was not a heavy thing. It was a choice they had both made. A new contract. A new path. Jae-hwan broke the silence. His voice was quiet in the hum of the ship. "You will need to be registered as co-pilot for the shipping licenses." Sumin nodded. "I understand. I can learn the systems. I will show you." "Thank you." Another stretch of quiet. It was comfortable. It was their quiet now. Sumin shifted in her seat. She looked at him. "What you did at the outpost. You did not have to agree." Jae-hwan kept his eyes on the viewport. "I know. Why did you?" He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke. "The ship was quiet before, but it was the quiet of an empty room. Now it is the quiet of a room where someone is reading." He paused, struggling with the words. "It is a better quiet." Sumin felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the best thing he could have said. She looked out at the stars, but she did not really see them. She felt the ship around her. She felt its energy fields, the familiar hum of the engine, the flow of power through the conduits in the walls. She raised her hands, just a little, in her lap. She closed her eyes. She did not focus on fixing anything. There was nothing broken. Instead, she began to weave. She felt for the chaotic energy of deep space that always pressed against the ship's shields. It was a formless, grating static. Gently, with the lightest touch of her mind, she began to smooth it, to fold it, to weave it into something harmonious. On the viewport, the streaking stars did not change, but the black space between them began to soften. A faint, gentle light emerged. It was not a solid thing. It was like a mist of color, pale green and soft blue. It shimmered at the edges of the view. A silent, beautiful aurora born from chaos. Jae-hwan saw it. His hands tightened on the controls, then relaxed. He did not look at her. He watched the colors dance at the edge of the starlines. His stern face, in the soft, reflected glow, seemed to soften. The deep lines were still there, but they looked less like cuts and more like marks of a life lived. "What is that?" he asked, his voice low. "The noise of nothing," Sumin said, her eyes still closed, a small smile on her face. "I am just making it sing a little." The ship flew on. The quiet inside was deep and rich. It was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of peace. Jaehoon flew the ship through the stars. Sumin wove the emptiness into light. They were not a normal pair. They were not a grand romance from a story. He was a human veteran with ghosts in his eyes. She was a Draconi weaver who had fled her cage. They had found each other in wreckage and cold silence. They had not saved a galaxy. They would not have great adventures. They would haul freight. They would do pre-flight checks. They would share quiet meals. He would teach her about engines. She would teach him to see the music in the machines. But in that moment, flying into the deep dark, their ship was the most peaceful place in the universe. It was a sanctuary they had built together from lost hopes and broken metal. It was a small, resilient light against the vastness. Moving forward, one steady heartbeat at a time, Jaehoon reached over to the small compartment by his chair. He took out the wooden box. He opened it. This time, he took out the silver jangdo. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then, he placed it on the console between the two seats. It was no longer a gift for a contract. It was a promise, a tool for their new path. Lying in the shimmering light of a woven sky, Sumin opened her eyes. She looked at the knife, then at him. She did not speak. She simply lifted her hand and placed it on the console, her fingers near the silver handle. Not touching it, just close that he gave a single, slow nod. The steady anchor flew on, a tiny shell of warmth and quiet in the endless night, its own small light shining bravely back at the stars.